So today I'm going to talk to you about whether or not you experience pleasure or satisfaction or contentment. So just not enjoying life the same way, going through it, just going through the motions, being sort of a spectator, not being in the game mentally, in terms of you're just not getting that same satisfaction. You do things, but you don't have that same joy, that same love, that same contentment for things that you used to have. So going out with friends, eating a pleasurable meal, satisfactory relationships. It's just sort of that just monotone feeling of not having that emotional connection to things. That's otherwise known as anhedonia. And we have very, very common reasons for this, but people don't really get the idea of how the genetics and the environment take part. And in our Your Genetic Type program that we teach about different genetic types that express themselves based on the perfect storm of stressors and environmental toxins and chemical exposures and pathogens and work demands and life and everything else in between, and how that marries with your particular genetic potentials. And in this case, you would be an understimulated type because you're not producing enough nutrients to give you those neurotransmitter products that help you rise to the occasion and have those emotions and those feelings and the pleasure and the contentment and the satisfaction and joy. We're just not seeing that. And what will happen a lot of the times is you may go and do a blood test with a functional doctor, and they may say, hey, you have a couple areas that you're low in over here, or you're high in over there, or you're normal. But mostly there's a couple of things that we can tweak in terms of your vitamin D is low, or maybe you have some extra glucose or insulin, or there's some signs of inflammation. You go ahead and you do a protocol and you don't feel any better. So this is what I want to do. I want to explain three main things that you need to look at that you're probably missing as to why you're not getting that pleasure from your life. So number one is BH4. BH4, otherwise known as tetrahydrobiopterin, and what it is it's a prerequisite to make your neurotransmitters, to make your dopamine, and to make your adrenaline, and to make your serotonin. And what happens is BH4 is not readily available for a lot of reasons, because stress, right? Because if we're under constant stress, your demand to produce BH4 is very, very high. Number two, your supply of producing BH4 can be very, very low. It may not be able to keep up with the demand, and supply and demand don't equal. You have low amounts of BH4, or we have oxidized BH4, which is BH2, and you need these enzymes that are working effectively. And there's other enzymes too. You need DHFR, QDPR, and then a cofactor called NADPH to help recycle these nutrients so that you have enough BH4 to make your neurotransmitters. And stress, cofactors, crappy diet, not enough B1 or B2, not enough folates, having a lot of different chemical exposures, and even heavy metals will slow down some of these enzymes. So it really takes an investigative approach, and we don't work with anyone without looking at their genetics to understand, hey, what's your potential for recycling BH4? Do you have some of these DHFR, QDPR? Do you have some NADPH challenges? And we can really look at that with your genetic potentials by looking at a genetic test, and also asking you a health history. Tell me about your timeline. Tell me about when it all went wrong. Was something going on in your life? Do you have a lot of different stressors? Did you get sick? Did you have a surgery? Did you have a trauma? We need to put all those puzzle pieces together to figure out how do we build Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's not just take this or take that. So BH4 is very, very important. I see it be a huge problem, especially when we see people that have ammonia problems or kidney problems or uric acid problems, because your BH4 will be consumed in that process of handling it. And that's a little bit beyond this video, But just get the idea is if you've never heard of BH4 before, or you've done a genetic test and never looked at these specific genes, and there's many others as well, and you've only looked at MTHFR, you're missing a big part of the puzzle. And NADPH is a huge several video section on its own. Number two is iron. So iron is very, very important for your dopamine, your adrenaline, your serotonin production. And a lot of the times people will say, well, I'm iron deficient. And I would say potentially you are iron deficient. Your hemoglobin is low, your hematocrit is low, your RBCs are low. But a lot of the times they're not low enough to be flagged on a lab range. Or even more importantly, it may be low, but you don't have low iron in the body. That's a really important point. So let me say it one more time. You may have low hemoglobin, low hematocrit, or low red blood cells from a lab range or trending towards a lab range, which may be missed in and of itself. But the conclusion would be, okay, Mrs. Jones, you have low iron. Let's pump you up with more iron. The problem is that iron is dysregulated in terms of it's not getting from point A to point B to point C to point D to the cells. There's a lot of broken assembly line workers along the way, and we assume that it's low iron, but it's not low iron in the body, and that will oxidize, and that will create free radicals, and that will chomp up your BH4, and that will use up your available resources. And iron is not available to help with BH4 to produce serotonin and dopamine. And no one's telling you about this, and you need to understand this. The last thing I would tell you is oxygen. So oxygen is part of that reaction. You need oxygen, BH4, iron, plenty of protein, which could be number 4, to make your neurotransmitters. And oxygen, when we see people, and I see them all the time, that they're exhausted and they're burnt out and they don't have energy, they tell me, it doesn't feel like I'm breathing optimally. I feel like shortness of breath. I can't catch my breath. I have exercise intolerance. It just feels like I'm running out of breath. And what I would say to you is that's a cell danger phenomena. That's a pseudo-hypoxia phenomenon. What that means basically is that your supply and demand, not only for biopterin production and supply and demand for that, but in terms of just raw materials, your B vitamins, your minerals, your proteins, your fats, your immune cells, you need enough supply to meet the demand. And if you don't, then your mitochondria start to fatigue and get weak and don't generate ATP very well. And if they don't generate ATP very well, they're not breathing very well, and there's not a lot of oxygen. And besides which, if you have a lot of inflammation, which is a fire, what does a fire need to burn? It needs oxygen. You have in the wilderness and you're starting to light a fire, you want to contain it so it's not getting too much oxygen and being put out. But at the same time, you don't want to smother it. You want to kind of fan it a little bit and bring some oxygen in so it burns brightly. And when you're under tremendous amounts of stress and your body goes into cell danger because your demand and supply is not equaling each other, you become pseudo-hypoxic, meaning you have what seems to be a decreased amount of oxygen available for your cells to breathe optimally. And watch that over and over and over again, because that's exactly what's happening. So together with biopterin concerns, iron dysregulation, oxygenation challenges, and protein issues, and stress, and life, and demands, and you need to have someone look at all of this and put this together, and not just say, okay, we got to put you on SSRIs, or those could be helpful in the short term, but you're not going to preserve more life of a neurotransmitter that's not even there. You can't make something from nothing. And that's what happens a lot of the times when you're being put on these uptake inhibitors, is that they keep things around longer, but things aren't there in the first place, so it doesn't work. So anyways, this is a great video for you to understand why you may be part of the under-stimulated type, not experiencing pleasure, not looking at your stressors, your demands and your supplies, looking at your biopterin, looking at your iron, and looking at your oxygen, and heavy metals and absorption and microbiome issues all play into that as well. So anyways, what I want you to do is go check out our website. It's called yourgenetictype.com. yourgenetictype.com, and you can take the free mini quiz, which would tell you, hey, based on your answers, there's only 35 questions. You are an understimulated type. And then what we do is we are selling a course called Genetic Type Unlocked, or Your Genetic Type Unlocked. And so now that you know you're an understimulated type, these would be the specific gene snips you'd want to look for. These would be the specific tests that you'd want to perform. These would be the proper supplements that you'd want to look at. And this would be the proper lifestyle stuff that you'd want to look at. So hopefully that was really informative for you. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and I look forward to ending your not having a pleasure in life anymore and making you feel nice and rosy and warm inside. So hope you have an awesome day.